Good morning, everybody, and welcome to church. Welcome to the metro region of the Los Angeles International Church of Christ. Great to have you with us this morning, and what a beautiful day. What a great day. Today is Father's Day, and I think it's a natural for church because, you know, Jesus presented God as a father, and he taught us to even call God Abba, which means dad, right? He was inviting us into a very intimate relationship with God. And of the many ways that God could present himself and did present himself in the past, I love this one. And this is the one that Jesus was trying to show us, was to think of God as our fathers. And the fact that we have a whole day set aside to give thanks for our fathers and our dads is wonderful. Many of us have great dads who really did great things for us. Unfortunately, also many of us have dads that were, well, let's just not go there, but you know what I'm talking about, that a lot of us are recovering from poor fatherhood or distant dads, or sometimes even abusive dads, which is especially damaging when somebody's growing up and when somebody's a child. But today's a day that we thank God and we thank our dads. You know, we thank our dads for all that they've done for us and whatever they did for us that helped us in any way. It's a wonderful day, and it's a good day to just stop and think about it. For many of us, it's kind of a mixed bag. We have some things that we wish were different, but we also have some things that we're very grateful for dads who took the time to teach us, to help us with something, to show us things, to just be the example. I mean, God has wired us in such a way that our dads have a huge impact on us right from the very beginning. I was just talking to my daughter, and she was telling me how, that when they discipline my granddaughter, Katie, that she takes it one way from my daughter, Alexis, but she takes it very different from Alexis's husband, her dad, Bobby. When he disciplines Katie really cries and gets hurt. There's just something special there. There's a special bond that we all naturally have with our dads. Of course, we have it with our moms in a different way, and in fact, in many ways, one could argue in a more powerful way. But with all of us, dads are important figures, and it did not escape me that in most of the Marvel comic movies, most of those characters all have dad issues, whether it's Superman or Thor or, Spider-Man didn't have a dad, or Batman, his dad being killed. All these different characters have dad issues, and which it kind of sends something. I think it's kind of our subconscious leaking out about how we feel about things. But even, Luke Skywalker, who's his dad, and all this. I mean, it's woven into our culture because dads are so important. So we're so grateful for all you dads out there who are loving, serving, giving, working hard to provide for your family. Thank you for who you are, what you are, and all that you do for your kids, for your wife, for your family, for your friends, for everyone. And we all, we all have dads and we all have moms, and we all should be grateful for whatever our dads did and express that. So happy Father's Day to you. If you're a dad, big day today. Actually, today is really two celebrations, right? There's two holidays that just happen to land on the same day here. It is both Father's Day, but it's also Juneteenth, which is Freedom Day, which is a day that has really caught on over the last few years, especially with the events of the last couple of years, and becoming more and more an increasingly important holiday for many, right? A day to celebrate freedom, a day to celebrate the Emancipation Proclamation to set people free from slavery. A huge day, of course, for the Black community, but freedom should be celebrated by everybody, right? I mean, this freedom is important. We're coming up to the 4th of July. We'll be celebrating the freedom of the United States from Great Britain. And so as I was thinking about and praying about this day, and what am I going to preach about, that is both Father's Day and Juneteenth, and two very different subjects. So here's what I came up with. Here's a good study that kind of touches and elevates both, I think. So the first thing I thought of, and this is, in prayer, so, maybe it's the Holy Spirit, maybe it was just me, was church fathers. I thought about the church fathers. Now, for those of you who don't know, that's a whole category of history in church history. Those are the people who laid the foundation of the church from the first 800 years of the church. And there's a whole list of them, which, by the way, many of them are African Americans, because the church was thriving in Africa, in the Middle East, and in what would be, southeastern Europe to Italy for the first 800 years. That's where the church's stronghold was. And there were many great church fathers also from Africa. Recently, last Black History Month, Casey Esmond walked through a number of church fathers from Africa. And there's some big ones. Some of the biggest church father names in church history were from Africa. And he touched lightly. I hope someday in the future we can go into it more about what they taught and what they did. But I don't want to go rehash it, because this is what Casey covered. But I was thinking about this and praying about this and thinking, well, what about modern day church fathers? Who would be the modern day church fathers? And there's someone who's I've really recently become kind of a fan of, who is a hero to me, that I thought I would love to share a little bit about, and then we'll look at how this ties spiritually to this day and in our lives as disciples. So his name is Charles Albert Tinley. Raise your hand if you've ever heard of him, right? I bet not many hands went up. He was born in 1851. He died in 1933. And he's considered by many a modern church father, or a major force and a major influence in American Christianity, and especially in the African American churches. But not just the African American churches. He had impact that went far beyond that. And I want to share a little bit. It's a reading from a book that was done about his life, and then we'll talk about it. So Charles Albert Tinley, somebody that we should all know, a name we should all know. So the reading is from The Prince of Colored Preachers. That's the title of the book. The Remarkable Story of Charles Albert Tinley. So we jump into it. Tinley lost his mother at age 5, and his father sold him into slavery. Remember, the emancipation was in the early 1860s. He was born in 1851, so slavery was still in place. And his father sold him into slavery. He was abused and wasn't allowed to look at books. Undeterred, at night he secretly taught himself to read by gathering newspaper clippings from the garbage. One day, he washed his shirt in a lake and snuck into an all-white church and he tiptoed up the stairs to the back of the gallery and hid behind some boxes. The preacher called for all the children who could read to come to the front to read a Bible verse. Little Charles thought, that includes me. I can read. So he sneaks on up there, and he comes down from the balcony and goes up to the front and says, so even though he was the only black person in the church and was barefoot, he walked past the hisses and the grunts of the people in the pews, and the pastor welcomed him to the altar and let him read from the Bible to the whole church. This was a remarkable moment, obviously. I mean, I'm just kind of blown away by the courage this little guy had, that he would come down and walk up there, obviously not dressed, especially, in the past, it was a big deal to dress up on Sunday, your Sunday best. And here, because he's poor, he doesn't even have shoes on, and to go up there and read because he wanted to read, and he taught himself to read, right? And the writer says, I often think about little Charles hiding behind the boxes and daring to come out to walk to the altar of the church. It seemed the whole congregation of white people was racist and rejecting him, but the pastor welcomed him. Charles heard the Lord calling his name, so he kept walking all the way through the crowd to the front of the church. He kept his eyes on Jesus and not the hissing crowd. Which obviously even that story will preach. Very moving story. After this, Tinley decided to become a pastor. Tinley believed that all things were possible with God. Through self-study and private tutoring, he got free of slavery and became an ordained Methodist Episcopal pastor. Through working, he worked as a janitor, he worked night and day, freed himself, and went into the ministry, which even just that alone is remarkable. The church he took over in Philadelphia, he was hired by a church in Philadelphia, had just 35 people in it. But soon people were filling the services and spilling outside to listen to the tall and humble man of God. To accommodate all the people, they built a bigger church, which grew from 35 to 12,500 people of multiple races, right? It wasn't just an all-black church. It was a mixed church. 12,500. We're talking the 1800s. And he's packing this church in Philadelphia with blacks and whites. It became known as the Tinley Temple. Furthermore, he was appreciated throughout Philadelphia for how they provided food, clothing, and business training for the poor. There was a church devoted to the poor, making a difference in the city, making a difference in the community. Is this intense or what? What an inspiration Charles is to us, to break out of slavery, teach himself to read, devote his life to Jesus, care for the poor, and pastor many thousands of people, including people from different races, which was especially rare in his day. This is so unheard of and so radical, and the impact he had on thousands of people because of his faith, his love, his convictions. You can see why I'm calling him a modern day church father. Charles was like Jesus, perhaps especially in how he forgave the slave master who oppressed and abused him. His story reminds me that our best ministry is how we respond to our trials. That preaches better than thousands of sermons. There's a famous story where a young man came to his church and came forward to become a Christian, and Charles pulls him aside, starts talking to him. Because when he'd come forward, he asked him his name, and he recognized the name. Pulled him aside, and turns out that this person's grandfather owned Charles at one point. He was a slave master, and he helps this person become a Christian, and helps him to know Jesus. Talk about the upside down kingdom. Talk about the power of the kingdom of God. Only this would happen. So Charles went on to be an amazing theologian. He was highly educated, wrote some very powerful things. He was a pastor, which, if you remember, we just studied this out. That means an elder. And oftentimes in different denominations, the elders also preach. He was a great preacher, pastor-preacher. He was a poet. He wrote amazing poetry. I've gotten to read a number of his poems. He was a writer. And he was a songwriter. He loved writing songs and hymns for the church. And I read he wrote over 400 different hymns for the church. Some of them you'll remember. 40 hymns. 40 hymns. And look, some of these you're going to remember or you'll recognize. So here, I just picked out a few. We'll understand it better by and by, right? We know that one. We will understand it better by and by. He wrote that. The storm is passing over. I think we call it encourage my soul. Encourage my soul. We sing that song. Stand by Me, which I wasn't sure when I read that. I thought, that couldn't be the Sam Cooke Stand By Me, could it? It actually is. It was originally a gospel song about standing by Jesus, about Jesus standing by me. And then later on, it was redone by Sam Cooke and became a big hit, right? Someday, the song we sing, someday, that was his song. And We Shall Overcome, which was the anthem of the civil rights movement 100 years later. We shall overcome. I mean, probably all of us have seen videos of the civil rights movement, and they're marching down the street. When they marched in Selma, they were singing, "We shall overcome." And that was his song. So, I mean, the incredible impact that this man had is just amazing. I think it's the value of when we go to a funeral or we go to hear a life celebration, to hear that all that somebody did in their life and how they impacted everybody, right? Charles had amazing impact because of his love, because of his forgiveness, because of his faithfulness, because of his humility, because of his willingness to forgive and to reach out even to those who oppressed him, to those who hurt him. I mean, those are powerful things. The impact of our devotion, loyalty, Charles's devotion and loyalty to God. It's what I love about funerals and celebrations of life, because you get to see the impact a person has in their life. And all the people that go up and share about them. And, I mean, how many times have I sat in a celebration of life and I hear all these incredible things and I start to wonder, am I even a Christian? Man, this person did amazing things. And it's somebody, it's just a normal person, but because they were loving, or because they were so forgiving, or because they were so faithful, or because they were always serving, or because they were so loyal to their friends, or they had such great humility. All these things, the things of God, these are the things that have a huge impact, that really make a difference. And it should stop us and make us think, okay, what is my impact? What difference am I making? And it's not that the answer that has nothing to do with how much money you make, how much money you have, how educated you are, how trained you are, what your title is, what kind of car you drive, what kind of clothes you can afford. It's got nothing to do with any of those things. It has everything to do with your ability to love, with your faithfulness, with your compassion, your empathy, your willingness to forgive, with the humility that you walk with before God, and even before your brothers and sisters, and even before the world. The devotion with which you live your life, being devoted to God, devoted to his kingdom, devoted to his church, devoted to the people he puts in our lives, our loyalty, that we don't betray Jesus, we don't betray the Holy Spirit, we don't betray the family of God, we don't just walk away from church because we found a church with a better building or a better program or whatever, but we're loyal members of our family that God gave us. All those things, love, forgiveness, faithfulness, humility, loyalty, devotion, they add up to a huge impact in life. Not always obvious, not always visible. I remember I heard this little story one time, a little preacher story, and it's a story about this guy dies and he goes to heaven, and he gets into heaven, and Peter's showing him around, and everybody's glowing with this white light, beautiful white light, and he feels the love from everybody. But then he sees one person that's just radiating, huge, filling the whole room, and he asks, "Who is that? Is that Jesus?" And Peter says, "No, that's not Jesus." He says, "Was that one of the apostles? That must be one of the great church leaders in history." He says, "No, that was the janitor of the church. He served for 50 years in that church." I think we don't realize how things look from God's perspective, how things look from a spiritual mindset. What does it mean to be great? What does it mean to do great things? Those things that have a great impact on others, they're the things of God. And that's really what matters. What our kids will remember us for is our love, our forgiveness, our humility, our truthfulness, our honesty, our authenticity, not our salary, not our titles, not our prestige or lack of, or not even our poverty. Well, those are the things that they will remember. Those are the things that matter. I think especially how we handle tough times. When things are hard, that's what impacts everybody. That's what our friends will share about at our funeral. And, I did this exercise one time with a group, and I had them all write down their own eulogy. And it might be a good thing to do. Write down your own eulogy. What's a eulogy? It's your life story and what you did. And they had to write their own eulogy, and it really made people think. There was another time I had a group, and I had them write down, if you found out you only had 3 months to live, what would you try to do in the next 3 months? And then we all shared it. And so everybody shared what they would do in the next 3 months. And so then my question was, why don't you do that now? Why don't you live that way? Why don't you, if these things, because the things that people talked about was spending time with my family, spending time with the people I love, being devoted to my friends, quality time with close friends, and building relationships, and doing stuff with my friends. Those are the things that everybody talks about. They don't talk about, I got 3 months to live. I'd like to work more. I'd like to put more hours in. I'd like to make some more money before I die. That's not, nobody cares. Or I want to buy a really nice car that I can't afford in the next 3 months so I can say I drove it around. Nobody does that. Nobody says those things. What they talk about is their relationships. What they always talk about is the love in their life. And the other thing they always talk about is resolving things. If I knew I only had 3 months left, then I would want to get resolved with my sister, my brother, my friend, or whoever, that they fell out of a relationship with. Or I want to, say I'm sorry to certain people, or I'd want to get certain things right. These are the things that matter. These are the things that there's no need to wait till we die to do this. Why not have the great life now? If we practice these things, love, forgiveness, faithfulness, humility, loyalty, devotion, it's what makes life great. This is what Jesus teaches us, but also it's what really impacts everybody around us. How we think about our dads has a lot to do with how loving they were, with how forgiving they were, whether they were loving or not loving, whether they forgave or were harsh, whether they were faithful or they were out running around being unfaithful to their family, to their spouse. Whether they were humble, admitted when they were wrong, or they were always right and you were always wrong. These things have a huge impact in our lives. And when we think of our dads, these are the things that come up. These are the things that matter. And when we think positively, we remember their love. We remember their sacrifice. We remember how they helped us. We remember what they did for us. So yeah, being a dad is a big thing, but this is what makes it big. It's practicing these things. And I think especially when we're in challenging times, whether it's economic challenge, emotional challenge, physical challenges, the world just falling apart all around us, shootings literally every day. How do we handle these stressful times? I love this quote from Martin Luther King, who was an inheritor of Charles's impact. The ultimate measure of man is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands at times of challenge and controversy. This is the ultimate measure of a man. It's how he handles adversity. What does he do when he's challenged, when he's going through a lot? That's what really matters. I love that quote. I love that quote. Jesus said this about our impact. He said, you are the salt of the earth. But if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. And this is a packed paragraph here. There's a whole lot here that could bless our lives immeasurably. Well, first of all, he says, you are the salt of the earth. I love this because we're going to get into salt. Probably everybody's heard sermons on what does it mean to be the salt. You preserve, you add flavor, you make something special, you change everything. Salt is a change agent. It's a preservation agent. It has impact, of course. But what I love about this is Jesus says this is what you are. Even though we may not be there yet, maybe we're not having a big impact yet, but he still says you are. And there's a tense in Greek where you can say something as though it is, even though you know it has not yet happened. And people call it the now not yet principle, the now not yet. And he uses that tense here. Even though we're not yet the salt, we haven't changed the world, but he calls us that. And Jesus, he's looking at a crowd of people. He knows exactly who we are. He knows how sinful we are. He knows how weak we are. He knows how troubled we are. He knows how helpless and harassed we are. And yet he still says, you are the salt of the earth. That's powerful. And Jesus is not a liar. And this isn't hyperbole. And sometimes preachers are guilty of hyperbole. They'll exaggerate something to make their point. I don't believe in that. I think hyperbole is just a fancy way of lying. I think the truth is always the best thing. He says, you are the salt of the earth. That's you. That's who you are in this world. But then, of course, he gives a challenge. But if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? And again, as I often say, whenever Jesus asks a question, you got to go back and think about that question, because he didn't ask questions so that you'll answer it. He asks questions to make us think about things. It's not because he wants the answer. It's because we need to think about it. But if salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? If we become Christians and we're having no impact, how do we get back to having impact? What do we need to be doing? What do we need to change to have the impact we were put on this planet to have? Because why? Because you are the salt of the earth. And he goes on, he says, it is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. This is a hard statement. I mean, there's a few of these, there's a handful of these that Jesus says. This is like the one with the vine, that such branches are cut off and thrown into the fire. This is another one. It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. Now, it's important to note he didn't say you are no longer good for anything, but he says this is what happens. This is a Christian that loses impact, that has no impact anymore. They're not good for anything. They're not making any difference, is what it's saying. And they're just like the salt that you throw out on the street. And that's what they would do. Old salt, they throw it out on the street. He said it's worthless. It has no impact, makes no difference. And that's being a disciple of Jesus, but you're not loving, you're not faithful, you're not forgiving people, you're not being compassionate, you're not serving. So you're not having any impact. And that's just living life in a worthless way. Living your life as in a worthless life. When anybody can love, anybody can serve, anybody can sacrifice. I mean, if all you have is 3 eggs in your refrigerator, you can give one away. You can make somebody an egg, an omelet. I mean, anybody and everybody can serve and love and give. The only reason why we wouldn't do that is because we don't want to. But it takes no level of talent or effort, no level of talent or education or money or anything like that to make a difference in this world, to have impact on others. And then he goes on to the next line, you are the light of the world. Again, Jesus, he says it again. You're the light of the world. And this one's even more powerful because Jesus was called the light. Remember, those of us who are going through the studies, the Jesus studies, it's the first line in the first paragraph of John. He's the light of the world, but the darkness does not understand it. Jesus is the light of the world. Back in ancient times, the Pharisees called themselves the lamps of God, to bring light into the world. And light illuminates, light shows you the way, light reveals danger, light shows you the path, I mean, there's all kinds of qualities of light. And he says, that's what you are. And again, he knows us. He knows our weaknesses. He knows our struggles. And he still says, you are. Not you're going to be someday. You are. That is who you are. Now, the question might be, are you living that way? But it's who you are. A toaster's a toaster. Whether you ever put any bread in it or ever use it to toast bread, it's still a toaster. You are the light of the world. Whether you're shining or not, you are the light of the world. But you need to know that. And he says, a town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Nobody hides it because there's no secret Christians. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on a stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. Our world is so messed up. Our world needs light. Well, how do we do that? By just being loving people, being kind people, being compassionate, being empathetic. You can say, well, really, Robert, I mean, if I'm just out there being nice to everybody, is that really going to make a difference? Absolutely it will. Go to a funeral. Go to a celebration of life, and you hear the difference that makes on people's lives. Time is always the test, and it reveals the impact one person can have. And you don't know, you might have an impact on somebody who has an impact on somebody who ends up changing the world, the next Martin Luther King or the next Nelson Mandela or the next Teresa of Calcutta. We have no idea our impact, but we do know that we can have impact. And that is how the world has changed. I've been all over the world and seen people's lives transformed by other people who are just simply being loving, who are just simply serving, simply giving. That's all they're doing. They're not running around in a cape flying. They're just being as much as they can like Jesus. And he says, in the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds. What deeds? That you go down and you serve the homeless when we have a community service day, or that you make cards and just encourage people at church that you think are having a rough time, or that you give somebody a call that you think is going through something difficult in life, that you forgive those who've hurt you, that you love up on people who are different, because in our world right now, that kind of love is so incredibly important. Philoxenia, right? Hospitality. That you do what is seemingly little things, but they add up to a mountain of change. If you've ever seen a snowflake, like you ever been out in the snow and you put your finger out and a snowflake falls on it and you look at it and it's beautiful, right? And it lasts maybe 10 seconds and then it melts on your finger. Snowflakes are about as weak and insignificant as you can think. But you know what happens if you put a whole bunch of snowflakes together? You get 10, 20 feet of snow, and then that snow moves and you've got an avalanche. And you can bury a house, you can knock down trees, you can change an entire landscape. By what? Just a bunch of snowflakes moving in the same direction. That's all it is. And that's us, every one of us. Every one of us is a little mini Jesus. And if we are loving and serving and giving, we make an impact. That's totally different than just being a church member, being a pew warmer. I learned a new term the other day. I was talking to my dentist. We were talking about church just the other day. And he said, I went to church on Easter and the minister called me. He said, Mr. CEO. And I said, CEO? And he said, yeah, he told me Christmas, Easter only member. And it was like, I said, wow, that challenged you. And he goes, yeah, that challenged me. In other words, only living your Christian life once in a while. And that's not what this is about. This isn't about being a member of the church. This isn't about coming to church on Sundays or watching the midweek, although there's a lot of people not even doing that. It's not about, what is the checklist I have to do. It's about being like Jesus. It's about living who you are. You are the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world. And it makes such a huge impact. Ask the children who's impacted their life and why or how. And they'll tell you. A little love, a little patience. In our world, it's so hurting right now. I don't know if you can feel it. I think you can. Our world is just hurting. It's lost. It's confused. It's groping in the darkness. And we need light. We need light. And I'll close with this, again, classic quote of another modern day church father. Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. What our world needs desperately is love. We celebrate today our dads. We celebrate Juneteenth, a day of emancipation, a day of freedom. That's important. That's important to every Christian because Jesus set us free. And with that freedom, not freedom so we can sin, but freedom so that we can love. Freedom so that we can cross barriers. Freedom so that we can knock down the walls of hostility. Freedom so that we can live as the salt of the earth and the light of the world, so that we can shine brightly to everyone. So I wish you a happy Father's Day. I pray that you are surrounded by love and appreciation, those of you who are dads. I pray that all of us can express our gratitude towards our dads. And those of us whose dads no longer live, find another dad. My dad died a long time ago, and I just text other dads and just thank them for what they have done and for their kids and the people around them. Thank God we have people devoted to love, to faith, to service, to sacrificing for others and having a great impact on us. So God bless you. Have a great day. Buen camino. Thank you for joining us. I hope this has been educational and inspiring for you. If you'd like to know more, please join us by going to study.laicc.net, and we'll be happy to contact you and help you in any way we can.